This week in the Sunday Telegraph, there is an article headlined, "Farmers face losing harvests under Starmer's Brexit reset." The UK will have to ban many pesticides hitting food production, with farmers already reeling from Rachel Reeves's inheritance tax raid. So, I was asked by LBC to go on and talk about this issue with Vanessa Phelps.
Back to that in just a minute, but first of all, let's deal with this story. Farmers face losing harvests under Starmer's Brexit reset. Farmers have said they face losing harvests because crucial agricultural chemicals will be banned under Labour's deal with the European Union. The UK will have to ban almost 30 widely used pesticides and fungicides after Sir Keir Starmer committed Britain to following EU laws. Growers warned that removing them could lead to significant falls in food production, further eroding their already tight profit margins. A raft of products will have to be taken off shelves, including treatments to prevent potato blight, which threatened crops during last year's wet winter. Let's get more on this from Liz Webster, the founder of Save British Farming. Hello, Liz. Sometimes I feel we need some kind of update on what the reality is here in a story that sounds absurd. Can you fill us in?
Yeah, I mean, look, it's complicated, all of this stuff.
Yeah.
But I think you've got to start with the fact that polling shows time and time again that the British public are really attached to high food standards. And Britain has had some of the highest food standards in the world until Brexit. And, it was always coming to terms with the fact that we're better off to be in the club, helping to mould those laws and regulations as they come through, rather than being outside it like a little raft, still trying to deal and, sell to that market and buy from that market. Because once you get out into the big ocean, there's other big trading blocks, America, China, India, and we, as a small little island, if we try and adapt to their standards, which is what we're trying to do, British farmers get undercut, and we are still held to relatively higher standards. But most of the food that we produce for export goes to the European Union. So having the advantage of some chemicals that Europe doesn't is really deregulation, and that locks us out of our market. So it's a conundrum. It's a Brexit conundrum, which is never really coming to terms with the fact that Brexit was missold, because I don't think the polling shows 8 to 9 out of 10 people don't want lower food standards. The Conservatives, when they got in power in 2019, were elected on a pledge to uphold our high standards. So I think it's not a good argument. And also, Ireland has the same climate as ours, possibly wetter.
Yeah.
And they did not lose potatoes in these recent floods because they didn't have these chemicals. We do need to push on with gene editing across the world. The European Union is slow to get on board of this. Gene editing holds the answers to using less chemicals, because as farmers, I'm a farmer, I don't like using chemicals. I'd rather not. We'd rather find new technology to combat that. So we are 100% better off to be back closer to the EU with similar standards, because Northern Ireland is in a different system to us now. Wales, and Scotland have different agriculture policy to English farmers. So since Brexit, our own internal market is a mess. It's not a level playing field. Before Brexit, we were on level terms with our competitors in the EU, and the protection of that stopped lower standard foods, substandard foods coming in here. You hear a lot about chlorinated chicken and hormone-fed beef, but there's a myriad of different things in America in particular that they allow, which are banned in the EU. And as a nation, we are more cautious than the Americans. I know that I certainly don't want to eat food which is bad for my health. But for us, we can't pick, even if you thought, well, actually, I do want to deregulate, we can't pick ourselves up and put us in Asia. And so the deregulation destroys our food security, because people on the other side of the world will always produce food cheaper than us because they've got lower standards and better weather. All of the lessons that we learned in the war, which actually formed the EU, really, which we helped to make, were all about making sure that Europe had food security. We now have a tyrant, attacking Europe, and we need to work together with the people that we share the same continent with, and that makes the most sense. So I think it's a bad look for farmers to say, "Oh no, it's terrible, this Brexit reset. We're not going to be able to use these chemicals which are banned in Europe." I don't think it's a good marketing label, even for a start, even without going into the complications and the complexities of whether the EU are being over cautious or under cautious. But Vanessa, if you had the choice of going with safety or sort of winging it on chemicals, which would you rather go with?
Well, that's the question. It just depends, I suppose, on whether the chemicals were safe, whether they'd harm me, whether they'd harm my children. It's all that kind of thing. And as a member of the public, you never really know. And that's why it's so important to discuss it on a show like this, isn't it? Because at least we have some idea then when you explain.
Exactly. The thing that I would moan about as a farmer that's not fair, but it's a Brexit unfairness, is that the European Union farmers still get food subsidies. Brexit robbed those of us. The European farmers still have freedom of movement, which means they don't have to pay for visa applications every 9 months like British farmers do. And we've also been stung with national insurance rises, which is directly as a hit because of the hit to the economy from Brexit. And we've also had this inheritance tax now, which is a Brexit freedom, because again, that is making it unfair and difficult for British producers. So there's many, many other things to moan about without saying, "Oh, these chemicals are a problem." I'm delighted that we have put an anchor down on standards, because I don't want to go in a race to the bottom with food standards. If we do that, then we're opening ourselves up to even more substandard imports with really bad trade deals with America, Brazil, huge producers. And that will put most of us out of business. And it'll mean that British high quality food will only be affordable, to the rich. Really rich people, because it'll become so sought after and expensive. And I think having food equality, which is what we have enjoyed since we went into the European Union, and great variety, food has changed so much since we went into the European Union, and it's gone backwards. Everybody must notice that there's less variety on the supermarket shelves because of Brexit. And many of our growers, British apples, have really suffered because of lower standard apples coming in, undercutting us. So British apples are now rare on supermarket shelves. That's a tragedy. I can moan about those sort of things forever, but I would rather be in the club, working with them scientifically, evidence-based, saying which are the best methods to use to ensure that we don't lose harvests and that food is safe. That, I think, is the best answer for us. Brexit was oversold on a bed of lies, and we have not found any Brexit benefits yet, not one.
Liz, thank you very much indeed. Thank you. Let me go straight to Gavin in Carlisle.
And Kent farmer and wholesaler David Catt also spoke to GB News about this same issue.
British farmers say they could lose entire harvests under Labour's Brexit reset plan, with nearly 30 key pesticides set to be banned.
Well, it's the latest blow for farmers already hit by falling profits and inheritance tax raid. And now they're warning of real risks to food security.
Yeah, rafts of products would have to be taken off the shelves, including treatments to prevent potato blight, deeming some entire crops to be banned.
Well, we're joined now by partner at David Catt & Son, David Catt himself. Good to see you this morning, David. And what would this mean for you if these pesticides were to be banned?
Mixed feelings on it. My father was an agronomist back in the 1960s, so I grew up with farm chemicals. And when you consider the stuff we used back in those days, there were some really nasty chemicals about. And the things are moving on. It is changing. So I think it's a little bit alarmist worrying about some of these chemicals. There's been chemicals banned every year anyway. That's happening, and I think we've gone along with European rules for the last 30 years, and it was never a problem. So I'm not sure. I just think the talks with Europe now, as far as our industry and the fishing industry is concerned, I know they say it's going to ruin fishing, but when you consider 80% or 70 to 80% of the fish caught in UK waters are sold to Europe or were sold to Europe, but our fishermen can't do it because of the red tape with Brexit has created. If things go well, then our fishermen can then start reselling our fish to the Europeans who eat it. We don't eat much of the fish we catch in our waters. Crops-wise, it opens up our markets again. A lot of beef, sheep, meat, dairy products and things we used to export, but because of the paperwork again, those businesses have gone. So I don't see it as all bad, to be honest. I think we've got to rely on ourselves and compete with Europe, who grow stuff to the same standards that we are so strict on. We can't compete with the Americans. We can't compete with the Australians because they don't have the same standards as we do. But
well, let's just talk about the Americans for a second, because the EU, of course, made some statements back in February saying that a lot of what they're doing, this protectionism, will help defend against American imports. And obviously, the UK, we just struck a deal with America, and some of that may look towards food. For farmers, is this a good deal for them because they'll have more protections from American goods coming in?
Absolutely, I think it will. I think that's probably the major benefit. Because do you want chlorinated chicken? Oh no, I certainly don't. I mean, it's chlorinated because the conditions it's grown in are so bad that they're having to wash the disease salmonella and E. coli off of it. When you get some of the politicians say, "Oh, it's no different to washing salads," well, we wash salads to get dirt off it with chlorinated water. That's not the same as washing meat in chlorine to kill the bugs that are on it. And we have much higher standards. And if those standards get lost, the British public demand that we provide these animal welfare and health standards, and then to allow someone to come in and undercut us, that would be absolutely disastrous. And if we can have the protection of Europe, who we've come alongside for a very, very long time, and our standards are very similar, let's get some unification there. And Europe is still our biggest market. We do more business with Europe than we do anyone else in the world. We just want free access to that market. At the moment, with the Brexit red tape and everything else, it's gone. We had an opportunity to sell straw to Poland, our mushroom suppliers from Poland, and because of the Ukraine war, and we got it all organised. We found the straw, we found the transport, got everything organised, but then there was a £450 or £480 a load vet certificate needed for each load, and the whole economics went out the window, so we lost the job. But these are opportunities we could be taking, but we're missing at the moment.
OK. David Catt there from David Catt, partner from Catt & Sons, should I say? Sorry, I beg your pardon. Thank you very much for coming on. Let's take a look.